Welcome to Week in Missouri Politics. 5 months ago, we had State Treasurer Scott Fitzpatrick home when he first took office, and now you're back. Tell us how the first few months have went.
Well, it's been really great. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and getting to learn everything inside the Treasurer's office. I've really liked doing the job. It's been great.
So when you look back, I guess the transition, you had some time to get acclimated. Treasurer Schmidt was around, I guess. The former state treasurer just down the hall, Sarah Steelman, the OA commissioner. What all goes into that transition? And now that you're in the office, what are some things you enjoy about it?
Well, things that go into the transition, number one is hiring staff. And so having the opportunity to talk to former treasurers like former Treasurer Schmidt, Steelman. I talked to former Treasurer's Weifel quite a bit as well. And
he's doing really well.
Yeah, and Treasurer Wendell Bailey. I talked
You can't have a good time talking to Wendell Bailey. You can't have a good time.
So I had Treasurer Bailey on the transition team, and he provided a good historical perspective for me. And so along with other folks in the business community, some legislators. So we had a good working group. Got what I feel like is a great staff hired in the Treasurer's office. And the first order of business was really just looking at the office. And by the time I swore in January 14th, the legislature was already underway, so didn't have much of a time to really formulate a legislative agenda for this session, although we did work on a few things. Got a bill related to ABLE passed to exempt those accounts from conservatorship, which is kind of a legal, complicated issue. But it's been good. We've changed a few things. We had to make some changes to Missouri First, which we may have talked about a little bit while I was here last time, that was going to be coming. But focused on ABLE a lot, and unclaimed property is another huge part of the office that I know we'll probably talk about. So
you're fully staffed up, though?
We're fully staffed up. Yeah, we've been we reviewed the investment policy early on. We reviewed the the policies within the office policies. We've been doing a review of all the rules that we govern, they're within our purview, but like 529 rules, so on and so forth. So just trying to really get a grasp and make sure everything's up to date, things like that.
You mentioned former Treasurer Schmidt. Something I know he's very passionate about was MoAble. I read where you guys announced you made 1,000 accounts.
We did, yeah. It was right around the 2-year anniversary. We had the 2-year anniversary of the program in April, and it's been a priority of my office, as it was with Treasurer Schmidt, to promote ABLE personally, to go out across the state, talk to people about it, explain the benefits of ABLE, and it's growing every day. And we've been working. We announced in April as well that Cox Health in Southwest Missouri, which is a large hospital system in Southwest Missouri, has begun offering their employees payroll deductions for ABLE accounts, so that people working there can have money held out of their paycheck and sent into their ABLE account, whether it's for them, because people with disabilities can work as well, or for their family members.
So I've noticed you haven't sat in the office, right? You've been around the state.
Been traveling a lot, yeah. Been traveling a lot, trying to spend a good amount of time in Jefferson City. I really want to get to know really kind of the detail level operations of how everybody does their job. And so I am trying to spend some time in Jefferson City, and specifically over in the Truman Building, which is not where my
God bless you.
office is. Yeah, hey, the Truman Building, it's a nice place. It'll grow on you actually after a while. So
I'm going to take your word on that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that's been publicized by yourself and most every treasurer. It's unclaimed property. Now, I've heard that. I know a lot of people have. What if a person is sitting watching this right now? How do you know if you have unclaimed property, and what kinds of unclaimed property would you have?
Yeah, so people don't understand that how unclaimed property can be generated, and it's a variety of things. So we just did an event around the anniversary of the tornado in Joplin. It was the 8-year anniversary of the 2011 tornado, and that we felt like created a lot of unclaimed property. We had an overrepresentation of that in Jasper County, and so you think about the things that can cause unclaimed property to be generated. So when somebody passes away and they don't have an estate in place, or they didn't have things planned out quite yet. When somebody moves and forgets to, their address changes, and they didn't notify somebody, and they had an account somewhere, or they had a utility deposit, that they didn't get back when they moved. And then when somebody changes jobs, a lot of unclaimed property is uncashed final paychecks, which seems crazy, but it does happen if somebody.
And they turn that over to the state.
It's all supposed to be turned over to the state, but it can be anything from unpaid life insurance proceeds, where somebody passed away and they couldn't find the beneficiary. It can be retirement accounts. A family member gets Alzheimer's and didn't have an estate plan in place. The kids didn't know about the retirement account. And so we make some really large returns. We're working on an account in Kansas City right now that we're trying to locate the individual. It's over $1 million, and we just.
So if you're watching, our friends in Kansas City watch, you should probably maybe pay attention, hit the website, right?
Yeah, well, we do proactive work in unclaimed property, and that's what we did in Joplin. We decided to take a proactive effort to return that property. Today, we started that in March, and we returned over $330,000 in Jasper County and over 1,600 accounts. So
Speaking of the 8th anniversary of that Joplin tornado, I saw you were on the ground in the places hit by the tornadoes a couple weeks ago, and with some of the flooding, what are some things your office is able to do to help business communities stay on their feet?
Yeah, so one of the things is with Missouri First, we can activate, it's been previously called HELP, which is the Harmed Area Emergency Loan Program. And what that does is basically just it prioritizes within the linked deposit program, Missouri First, areas that have been subject to damage like that. So it's basically a low cost capital program where we can work with the banks in the area to put states' resources in the bank for them to loan out to those businesses that have been harmed.
You've mentioned Missouri First a couple times. What is Missouri First?
So Missouri First is the state's linked deposit program, and by linked deposit that means that a business or a farm that's looking to expand, or in some cases it could be rebuild their business or their farm, they can go to a participating lender. We have over 130 participating Missouri First lenders in the state, and they can put in an application for a linked deposit through Missouri First in the Treasurer's office, where essentially what will happen is they apply for a loan with the bank. The state will put money in the bank at a discounted interest rate to the bank. So the bank is paying less for the deposit, and in turn are able to turn around and loan that money out. And right now the discount rate that the borrower gets is 30% from market rate. So if it's a 6% loan, it takes it down to 4.2% interest rate on $1 million. That's $18,000 a year in savings and interest. And it's not a handout, it's not a grant, but what it does is it provides lower cost capital for businesses that are looking to expand. So
talk about Governor Parson. You guys known each other a long time from the same neck of the woods down in southwest Missouri.
Yep.
What's the relationship like been with him, and how's your office work with his?
It's been good, and the governor number one, he had a great legislative session, incredibly successful legislative session, in my opinion. Really, showed leadership. I've said that the dynamic between the legislature and the executive branch was designed by the founders to be confrontational,
Sure.
And I think that the governor really did a great job working with the legislature in terms of managing the relationship.
I think it's good. It's designed to be confrontational, but maybe not adversarial.
Sure. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think there are ways to have. It's interesting because I think the governor and the legislature and me and the other statewide, I think we all have very similar goals. And oftentimes when it comes to the legislature and working with the executive branch, there can be some difference of opinion on how you get there, right? And
Probably should be, right?
Yeah, there should be, and I think that good people can disagree on a lot of things. But the governor's done an exceptional job, I think, working with the legislature and on the legislative agenda. I'm working with his office right now on MHTC stuff.
Sure.
Trying to do some transparency things at MHTC that they've been focused on, and so we're trying to collaborate on that.
Let's talk about a person that took the baton from you on the House Budget Committee. That's how the state come to know you as chair of the House Budget Committee. Cody Smith comes in, and speaking of the governor, signed all the budget bills without any withholdings. Speaks highly of your predecessor.
It does, and I think that both Cody Smith and the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Representative Smith, and Senator Hegeman,
Sure.
chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, worked really well together. I think it was great that they came to a compromise position on the bonding package that the governor proposed. I think it's a great outcome where we're putting some cash in up front and financing that over a shorter term to save interest payments over the years. So I think they really worked well together, and I think the governor's wholesale signing of the budget was indicative of that.
Yeah.
They did a good job, I think, of not spending all the money, which was a big thing when I was budget chairman. I wanted to make sure that we planned on a reasonable revenue estimate and that we then didn't spend all the money we thought we were going to have in case A, the revenue didn't come in, or B, we had unplanned expenditures. And they did a great job, I think, on both of those areas.
Speaking of, it looks like the revenue is going to come in this year, right? There's some concerns about that early on, but it looks like it's on pace.
Last thing I did as budget chairman was agree to was the consensus revenue estimate. It was the last thing I did before I went to be the treasurer. And this year, the consensus revenue estimate was 1.7%, and we're at 1.8% today. So if we wrap up the next couple of weeks, yeah. And but I think we always try to take into account the bills that we pass in the legislature, because those oftentimes do have revenue impacts.
Yeah.
as well as the tax cuts that are working their way in that I think are being impactful in a great way in our state. Personal income growth is up over 5% this year over last year, just in terms of tax filers. That's data straight out of DOR, which is strong income growth. So I think tax cuts are working and the economy is strong in Missouri.
Last question, 2020 is coming up. I know there's folks talking about launching their campaigns. You made a decision if you're going to be on the ballot in 2020?
Yeah, so right now, obviously, we have a little bit of time before filing,
Sure.
and crazy things can happen, but I've really enjoyed being the treasurer. I've been going all over the state, introducing myself to the people of the state, and I hope to be able to continue doing the job of treasurer after 2020.
You're out on the you're out seeing people, what'll lead to the campaign trail. Looks like Donald Trump won Missouri by a nearly historic margin. Where do you see the president politically and I guess the Republican Party? Can you replicate that, what you did in 2016 and 2020?
Well, I think we can, and I think we will. I think if you look at 2018, for an example,
Sure.
Things were supposed to be terrible, and you could make the case that things were pretty tough for Republicans in 2018 nationally. They lost the House, the U.S. House. In Missouri, though, we took a Senate seat and we maintained historic majorities in both the House and the Senate, and so I feel like we are poised to have a good year again in 2020, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that.
As the campaign heats up, we hope to come back here on This Week in Missouri Politics and talk about it with us.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Representative Bruce Franks joins us after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker panel time. Now former Representative Bruce Franks. I heard now you're going to be unfiltered and no one can tell the difference, right?
What's going on?
Welcome back to the show. Representative Tracy McCreery, thank you for joining us. First time on the show, Brett Dinkins, Iron County's own. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Jeff Roorda, Jefferson County's finest. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Where? Who?
Let's talk, Tracy. Interesting week. There's the biggest thing that may have happened last year in politics was when labor groups come and overturn the right to work vote. They used something called a citizens veto measure. There was folks right and left, David Humphreys, ACLU, many groups come together, and we're going to try to take out this sweeping pro-life legislation the governor signed. However, there was an emergency clause attached to this legislation, which now the Secretary of State has said because you have an emergency clause, you can't use that process to go about vetoing this bill. There's a logic to it, but it really is going to change the face of these initiative petitions.
Well, I think we still have to hear what the courts have to say about that. I don't think that the Secretary of State is correct on this. So, and I think what the Secretary of State is doing is he's trying to play politics with the rights of voters, of regular Missourians, to have their say on something. And I think that that these anti-choice elected officials are just trying, they know that the public does not want to see a woman's right to choose go away in this state. And so they're trying to silence the voice of the voters.
Now, I'll say there's probably no one more pro-right to work than Jay Ashcroft. And probably maybe nobody would say more pro-life. during the court fights over the language on the right to work board, and Jeff can attest this, there were a couple times where it was probably politically expedient for him to rule against labor and what they were trying to do, and he played it pretty straight. It's an interesting thing. I think he's got a track record with someone on the right that maybe wish he would put his finger on the scales a little bit more.
Well, I think that what we're seeing is extremist politicians doubling down on this. And, our U.S. Senator Roy Blunt, President Trump, they all have said that this bill is too extreme. And so, obviously the voters believe these bills are too extreme as well. And I don't know why they don't just let the voters overturn this extremism. It's really bad for Missouri.
Jeff Roorda, you head the Police Officers Association in the city of St. Louis. You were a big part of the labor movement to overturn right to work. It was a very effective measure. It makes a lot of sense. You get to tell the politicians no. If these emergency clauses are attached to these, this will fundamentally change how these petitions move forward.
Well, here's what the High Court's going to say, Scott. Forget whether you're pro-labor, anti-labor, pro-life, or pro-choice. What the court's going to say is that the framers of the Constitution didn't mean for the legislature to be able to usurp the will of the voters with sleight of hand. They wanted the citizens to have the final word. They may say that the part that's already enacted, the part that was enacted on an emergency clause, stands, but the rest of the bill is going to be up for grabs. It's going to be a political piñata, and the voters get to take a swing at it.
Brett, I have to say, if you're Jay Ashcroft, I do think he has a reputation of playing things straight with election law. Sure. And I also think that this will be a big deal in moving forward. If the legislature puts something on the ballot now, you just put an emergency clause on it, right?
Well, set the bill aside and think that Jay Ashcroft grew up with a United States Attorney General as a legal mentor. And I think he showed he has a very sound understanding of the law. And this week, initially, the courts agreed with him.
I think he's been a fair guy, too. I mean, he's taken criticism from the right and the left, which usually means you're probably doing a fair job.
Absolutely.
Bruce, it's interesting. The vote just seems like something you'd like. Taking it to the streets, taking a vote to the public, that just seems like Bruce Franks to me. It does seem like maybe, I don't know, wouldn't be at all know what the letter of the law says, but it does seem like the spirit of the law, the citizen's veto is a cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process where our constituents can have a say-so, right, even when we get it wrong. And one thing that always bothers me is the fact that we heard the right say, oh, well, we ran on right to work, right? We ran on no minimum wage. And then the people as a whole throughout the entire state of Missouri spoke, not just in Democratic areas, but in Republican areas too.
I didn't see anybody run really pro-right to work in any large measure in the Republican Party. I've never seen people run no minimum wage. However, I think it's fair to say Republicans do run pro-life.
Oh, they absolutely do. But it's also fair to say that they ran pro-right to work as well, because every single argument on the floor was, well, the people have spoken because they elected us, and elections have consequences.
You didn't see any commercials talking about that, but you see commercials talking about being pro-life.
No,
I mean, that is a tenet of the Republican Party, and has been, for my whole professional lifetime. Let me ask you something about this Planned Parenthood clinic. There was a ruling come out this week that said the clinic can stay open while the court fight goes on. I did not really even know where it was. You're one of the first people that really talked to me about being, not from St. Louis, about where it is, what it does, who it services. The clinic is now staying open, but there is an argument of should not that clinic go by the same rules and regulations as every other clinic in the state?
So this is my thing about Planned Parenthood. We get this argument, and when people hear Planned Parenthood, shoulders rise and they flare up. When they don't understand, in my community, I'm from 4300 Gibson, and the Forest Park Planned Parenthood is 10 blocks from where we grew up. And a lot of folks who didn't have access to health care and certain services, we went to Planned Parenthood, right? And so when they do 96, 97, whatever the percentage is, of those type of services, are you going to use politics, right, and this idea that Planned Parenthood is the bad guy to take away health care for these communities that really rely on it? That's the bigger issue outside of this overarching issue that we keep trying to tell women what to do with their bodies, which is none of our business. But you have somewhere that actually provides health care for economically distressed communities, and we're taking away another resource again. And so that's how I feel about it.
I'm from 677 County Road 454. I don't know a lot about these things, but Tracy McCreery, this is an interesting bite I saw when I said go by the same rules everyone else. You scoffed a little bit.
Right.
I don't see Mike Parson as a guy who's out headhunting. Maybe the laws that have been written headhunt that Planned Parenthood clinic.
There are countless clinics, like surgery centers, that are way worse performers than Planned Parenthood by leaps and bounds, and they're allowed to stay open, and they're not being used as a political football. So this is just the governor's attempt to politicize something that just makes no sense to me. This is about the government trying to take away a woman's constitutionally protected right to choose, and it leading up to an election year, and it's unacceptable. The government has no role in getting between a woman and her doctor.
Brett Dinkins, anytime you talk about Planned Parenthood abortion, most of the time logic, no one can really, it's such an emotional topic, it's hard to stay logical. But Mike Parson isn't the guy that's on Facebook blowing up things, pew, 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 crazy stuff. He talks about workforce development, he talks about adult issues. I don't see him as a grandstander. That's why if there is grandstanding going on, it would be out of the norm for him.
That's right. No, the legislature passes laws, and it's his job and his department's jobs to enforce those, and we have regulations for a reason. We saw this legislature remove caps for pregnancy resource centers this last cycle. I think it's ridiculous to argue that they're trying to cut off health care for anyone, but Parsons is just doing his job and making sure that there's a certain standard of health and safety available for people across the state.
I think there are some laws that was passed by the Missouri General Assembly that probably do regulate this clinic maybe a little more than others. But again, I don't see Parson going out grandstanding on the issue.
Well, look, if you separate the things that Planned Parenthood is doing and compare them to other health clinics across the state, I don't think Republicans are against all the services that they might provide. But this is about, an abortion issue, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. And Planned Parenthood you can't talk about removing all health care. That's not what Republicans are trying to do here.
So the politics of this, Jeff Roorda, you represented a very competitive district in Jefferson County, a place where I would say probably very overwhelmingly pro-life, Catholic, but they used to vote Democrat.
Right.
If Democrats stay where they are on this issue, can you get them to vote Democrat again?
No, it hurts the party that these far left and far right issues are at play. But this particular issue isn't about whether you like abortion services or don't. The judge has a very narrow question in front of him. Is this the exclusive form of relief, this temporary restraining order, and is there irreparable harm done if he doesn't issue it? And he's got one of the most keen minds on the bench in St. Louis, Mike Stelzer does, and he issued the TRO.
Let's talk about the budget. Was signed, all of it by the governor. No line item withholdings. I mean, hat tip to Cody Smith, Senator Hageman, Senator Huff. I mean, I think if that's not an olive branch of the legislature, I'm not sure what is.
Absolutely. I think he showed that despite any friction that might have occurred during session, that he was willing to extend that olive branch. We're talking about record funding for K through 12, his infrastructure and transportation projects done, $5 million for rural broadband and a correctional officer's raise. I mean, there's a lot of great things in this budget that needed to happen, and I think Parson showed that he trusted the legislature to get those things done.
George, tell me, I think you could make an argument that sometimes you're almost entrapping someone when you send them into a correctional facility so ridiculously paid for what they do. It's not logical. You would never run a business that way. If Republicans want to pass very tough criminal laws, that's fine, but you have to fund the prisons for the people that violate them. I almost think I almost think a court could have even stepped in for corrections officers.
Right, and the same thing with public defenders. I mean, we don't put our money where our mouth is in our budgeting, and I'm a big fan of Governor Parson, served with him for 6 years in the House, but this is just largely ceremonial. He can still do withholds, and he will do withholds. So
if
this is
revenue's
just
down, right? Which as of now it's not.
Well, they did change the Constitution a little bit, but that's because they wanted to squeeze the Democrats' feet. There's nobody there to squeeze those feet
Jefferson
anymore.
County and Jerry Dick's going to find out how to do that if he wanted to. I mean, but I have to say, when they're in Southwest Missouri, Cody Smith, the budget chair, could maybe look at the state treasurer we had on earlier and say, well, none of mine got vetoed.
Well, this budget does not reflect the values of a lot of Missourians, and the state law says that we are supposed to be adequately funding transportation for kids going to public schools, and we are violating the state law right now. We're underfunding public transportation to schools by $190 million. So I don't think there's any reason to celebrate.
Let me just ask you a brass tacks question. You're someone who's talked about as a potential statewide candidate, one of the rising stars in the Democratic Party in Missouri. Can you, if you can't go to Jefferson County and compete on it, and because of issues like abortion, are you ever going to be able to change the state's funding priorities?
I believe we can, but I also disagree slightly with Mr. Roorda. When you look at polling, over 75% of Missourians support the government staying out of a woman's right to choose. So it's not a Democrat-Republican issue. It's just a human issue. So I don't think that we should make this political.
This budget is something you know a little about now, former representative. It is a very, I think, show of statesmanship for the governor to not quibble over small things, sign the entire budget. It's a bit of a sign of respect to the House, right, and the Senate.
So I think so, but going back to what Representative McCreery said, we had our issues when it came to the budget and the budget process, and with all due respect to Representative Smith, who was a good guy, we had some major issues. And when you talk about crime prevention from the root cause, especially when you talk about economically distressed communities, and then you don't want to expand funding for a program that we funded the last 2 years, when we see that we've spread this program out to year-wide now. It's not just a couple of months anymore, it's year-wide. So if you make it year-wide, you're gonna have to put more money into it. And that political show they put on the floor when we were talking about summer jobs was egregious. And to know that, and I'm glad.
Do you think they regret a little bit the more statesman members of the Republican caucus not having at least a few Democrat amendments in there?
Also, I think they do, but at the end of the day, it wasn't up to them. It was up to the budget chair who made his choices. And so that's who we have to hold accountable. So I would take our treasurer back any day, as budget chair.
Now if they're talking, having coffee, Cody can say, well, none of my items got vetoed, and he could say, well, Representative Franks wishes I was back, so maybe it'll level out. Jeff Roorda with a minute left, 2 on the week.
Let's go Blues.
Hard to argue with that. Really great thing to happen for the city of St. Louis, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Unfortunately, this mayor isn't going to use the money to fund police like Francis Slade did when the World Series won here.
Well, hopefully we'll win a World Series and we can actually see, who won the week?
I'm going to say Senator Searpoy and Representative Patterson for helping at least end the border war on our side of the state. The governor signed that legislation into law, and hopefully that'll mean economic development for Kansas City as a whole and not just going back and forth between the Missouri and Kansas side.
Can't go wrong saying Mike Searpoy won the week. Who do you think won the week?
I think our auditor, Nicole Galloway, she is continuing to do a good job shining a light on how our Department of Revenue is not getting the tax refunds out in a timely manner.
She gonna run for governor?
I hope she does.
Who won the week?
I think my brother Jason Kander won the week. Being at the forefront and talking about mental health and PTSD and letting folks know from a wider platform that it's okay to not be okay and it's okay to get help. That's something that resonates wholeheartedly with me. So
I'm going to say somebody that you brought up earlier. You won an award this week about addressing situations in women's prisons and how it does matter to have a woman who is the director of corrections and Preside, I think, won the week. What a tremendous example she's setting and doing and giving an example of why diversity can matter. I think that's important. Hope you'll win the week next week by joining us here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.